want me to just go for it? All right, hey, cool, why not? Hey, you do realize this is my first time here, right? I just want to make sure. Hey guys, I guess we'll get going because I think we had it scheduled to, whoa, that is loud. Everyone doing okay? Settling in? Yes, hi. If you didn't know that we actually present in this room after lunch and you awkwardly want to leave now, feel free. No? Okay. People didn't know it yesterday. Come on, Amanda, take a seat. I know, I will. I was just trying to get everyone to settle in. I was just joking with Mike. I think Judith was supposed to start. I know I'm not Judith. I apologize, okay, guys? But I'm happy to be here. So I'm just going to jump right in. I think we broke it down to where I think about 45 minutes for me, right? 45 minutes for Heather and Leah, and then Mike. Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here today. So I have a tendency to speak very quickly, so I will try my hardest to keep it slow. But I want to thank Lori for inviting me. I know she's not here right now, but please tell her that I said that because I'm very excited to be here. All right, guys, I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to start with a note to myself. Yeah?
Can you ask people to please be quiet? It's really hard to hear from you, even in the front.
That is too funny because no one ever tells me it's hard to hear me. So yes, no problem.
Well,
I know, it's hard, guys. Are we good now? We're settling in? I can wait a second. Close the doors, yeah. Would you mind closing those doors? Thank you. I know, because it's hard. That's why I just said I'm not Judith. Mike told me to get up here. Do you want to please? No? Are you sure? Okay. I don't know why it said 1 o'clock for today and 1:15 for yesterday. Yeah. Am I wrong on that? Am I being way too obsessive? Oh, yes, I forgot the picture. I'm a first timer, guys. I don't know what I'm doing here. No. All right, let's do this. I'm going to start with a note to self. I joke that this is also a note to others, just in case there's anyone in the room that has been fortunate enough to have Lori invite you to speak. So I had to start right away. Yes, I am making you guys all sit here and watch my emails. I hope that's okay, all right? So I want to note the date here. Here's a note to self. When you're prepping to present for Lori and you don't hear anything about what you're supposed to do, what you should not do is send Lori a bunch of options about what to talk about. So I said, hey, Lori, do you want me to give a personal narrative about how I started 20 years ago as a traditional ABA therapist and how I own a company with a couple hundred people now and run residential and across ages and kind of tell that story? Or do you want me to get more technical about the residential service line that we run in California? I went through all these things, right? Here's the problem. So note to all of you, right? Right there, yeah. So all right, okay. So the good news is that that's when she came back and said I have 45 minutes. So I'm going to try my hardest to get through all of those topics, but I just wanted to warn everyone in case you ever get that invite. Don't do that, all right? Okay. All right, guys, so who am I and how did I end up here and now? So I always like to just acknowledge quickly, I'm nobody important. I love how Lori makes such a moment of saying that we are all colleagues here. At ABA International and CalABA, I often tell my former students and my employees that if you look, it doesn't say doctor on people's name tags. Like, we are all in this together. So I do like to acknowledge these places, though, because I am a bit of an odd ABA company owner, especially in California. And the reason why I am in a position to practice across ages and diagnoses is just because I was fortunate enough to work at a bunch of different institutions early on in my career that exposed me to those populations. So I was very lucky to do that. So I always like to give a quick shout out to these organizations that I was with early on. I also need to acknowledge, only because there's publications, this was an admin appreciation event. I had no idea this was a trivia game. So anyway, that girl named Rachel Tarbox who published a lot, she's doing just fine. In case you were wondering, we're going to move on, all right? There are a few different names that my work is under, guys. All right, I'm going to start with why CABA, only because Lori had said for me to tell a bit of my story. So, all right, that is 16 years ago. I had no idea that 7 years later we would be facing a massive regression with my son. And the ironic part is that I was nursing him in the hallway when I was defending my doctoral dissertation with Linda Hayes and Pat Fryman. And so who would have ever thought in a million years that I would be a parent? And who would have thought that my husband would join me and be a stay-at-home dad? And it took me a couple times to not marry a BCBA, but he was the one seeing the program and was quick to say when I would come home, I don't know what they're working on. These goals don't seem to align with what our problems are right now with him. And haven't people told you to start a company? And I was back in academia. I was a professor at the time, and I was director of research at CARD and had left and gone back to teaching. And I said, yeah, I just don't think so. And then as his services went on, my husband really pushed and said, look, this is not right. The supervisor's not showing up. The staff don't know what they're doing, and we got to get this right. So Johnny's doing okay. He's 16 now. He's definitely struggling still, but I always like to show a nice picture there. But that is why we started CABA. So I'm fortunate that I've got a lot of former students that have started some great agencies, and everyone laughs that I'm the weird one that didn't do it until after the age of 40, because now you have to do it, when you're like 24 with a logo and a website, right? All right, guys. So what is CABA? CABA is the Center for Applied Behavior Analysis. We are located in California. Our main office is in Los Angeles, and we have a very small office in the East Bay. And that's our team. Recently, we did start changing our language. We no longer say advisees or mentees or supervisees. We call each other colleagues. And we do take it very seriously that we're a family, and that is quite literal as well. My husband and my brother are with me at the summit because they are the executive team members. So, and the rest of the clinicians are former grad students of mine. So it's been a really nice time for us all to get together and really embrace that aspect of it. So what does CABA do? I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, but it's an interesting grid because this is not about me talking about CABA today. I've been invited to talk about a new category of residential homes in California, but I like to pop this grid up there because the story behind why we had to create it is actually interesting, kind of funny. I got a call from a very powerful parent, and she said, look, Rachel, I wanted to let you know that I was just speaking to a colleague, a very well-known behavior analyst in California who I've worked with for many, many years, and she said, I was speaking to this person, and they said that they thought that you offered a service line that was not ABA. I was like, I'm sorry, what? At the Center for Applied Behavior Analysis? Excuse me? And she's like, yeah, I thought you'd want to know. And so leave it to me just to call him and say, hey, like, I'm wondering, nothing bad. He was very apologetic. And I was like, I'm not looking for an apology. I'm a little confused. And I don't know how many people from California here, anyone? Okay. So I don't know if you guys have noticed it seems like there's a big uptick in behavioral respite as a service category coming out of regional centers right now. Can I get some water? I'm so sorry. That one. And so he said to me, I thought you guys offered behavioral respite. I'm so sorry. And I said, no, we don't offer that service line, but you know me. If I offered behavioral respite, it would still be based on a foundation of ABA. It would just be, our goals would be different. That's about ensuring that the parent's getting a break and getting respite, right? So we're going to measure stress levels. Perhaps the individual is in a traditional ABA program and they have programs that they're working on that are in maintenance or generalization and they should be working on in their downtime, then we would do that and we would still be measuring things. So it's still ABA. So I was very confused, but I'm happy it happened because it made us have to break this all down and show, yeah, we offer a bunch of different service lines, but they're all ABA. I know it's a lot up there. I hope you guys can just see it at a glance as to how we look at it. Today I'm going to talk about EBSH. And we operate 4 homes, and all of our homes are for young adults right now. And I'm going to jump right into that. Does this make sense, guys? Is it helpful to kind of see even at a glance without me taking time on it? All right. So the email that changed everything is if I already didn't get personal enough, look how cute I was. Right? So this was my dad. I'm sorry if I'm going to bring up anything emotional for anybody right now, but I know most of us that are in this work, we come from a personal place, and I said yes, so if you've been through that, this was a couple years ago. It was actually the last conversation I had with him. I was in the hospital. It was about a week before he passed away, and I got an email from a regional center saying, hey, Rachel, will you guys please apply to this request for proposals for a new category of homes in the state of California? And I said, guys, you know how small CABA is. There's tons of residential providers. And they said, look, we're taking an ABA approach at the state level, and we'd really like you to do it. And so I asked my dad, I said, hey, what do you think? And he said, you're doing this. So it's a very nice kind of story to tell 2 years later. That said, this is what I looked like for the next 2 years, and it's not because my dad died, all right? It's because we decided to open 4 residential homes in 16 months, okay? So I will tell a little bit of that story, and that's what I wrote in the email to Lori. I said, do you want me to kind of go through lessons learned and what we went through in this process? So I'll make it nice since I looked so terrible on my couch there, right? So those are the 4 ribbon cutting ceremonies, and it has been quite a ride. So they are 3 to 4 bedroom homes, and I will give you guys a lot more detail about what those look like. So what is EBSH? This is Leanne Christian, who is the Deputy Director of Community Services for DDS in the state of California. This is her slide from a presentation that Lori saw us do at CalABA last year. And this is how DDS refers to it, as a new community service model. And enhanced behavioral support homes serve adults and children who need enhanced behavioral supports in a home-like setting. So we are certified by DDS, and we are also licensed by DSS, so the Department of Social Services. So we go through both of those entities, which in the state of California all runs through the regional center system. The biggest difference is that to this point, most residential program, all really in California, The BCBA support is typically at an independent contractor level, all right? So we have a dozen full-time BCBAs at CABA. We offer traditional ABA for young kids with autism in their homes. We offer social skills groups. We have a community-based adult day program. So we have BCBAs across everything. The other huge change is that all direct staff in the EBSH program in the state of California are required to become registered behavior technicians, which was a kind of a big deal. So I'll talk more about that. All right, guys, I figured there were some type A's in the house, right? That's why you're here. There's your official language. You can glance at it. You can click at the website. I'll give these slides later. Feel free. I don't know who I'm supposed to give them to, but and it's basically what I just said, 24-hour non-medical care to individuals with developmental disabilities with enhanced behavioral needs. We do have additional staffing. We get increased support at the BCBA level. And again, as I mentioned, the direct staff become registered behavior technicians. So this is the talk that Lori came to last year, and that's why she came up to me and said, could you please come and present at the summit to explain what's going on with this service line? And it was myself and Dr. Christian, who I just mentioned with DDS, and then she also wanted a BCBA who worked for a regional center. And when Leanne first called me, I said, Leanne, you know me. I don't know if you really want me on a panel with you. I said, are you serious? Because I'm very honest. I'm very transparent. And there's some issues with this model. And as you all know, I'm sure, anyone who's gotten in any state and tried to start anything, we're in the beginning of it. So you can imagine there's been a lot of challenges. And I told her, I know DDS is very specific about what you can and cannot say in public. And to Leanne's credit, she said, Rachel, this is why I want you there. So we had a real frank conversation about some of the challenges that we're facing. So I'm excited to share some of that with you guys today. So let's get some data, guys. These are I know it's California centric. I apologize. I'm really excited. I'm fortunate that I've been invited to do a lot of invited speaking events over the next 9 months across the United States. And I'm not as familiar with residential models throughout the country. I did start, Gina Green was standing over my shoulder in 1998 watching me work with a kid with autism in Boston. So. And that was at the New England Center, which has an amazing residential program. So I had trained in that. I'm from California. But I'm looking forward to this next 9 months so I can learn more and from all of you, hopefully the rest of today, as to how it's working. But I am going to make it about California. I hope that's helpful. There's a lot of people in California. You guys all know that, right? Everyone moved there. Pause for a second. How many parents in here right now? Cool. Providers? Cool. Both parent and provider? Cool. All right. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. So you see a range in the state there where you have one regional center that only supports 3,800 people and you got another that supports 35,000. So right there you have a system that is an interesting system to manage, right? Who do they serve? Here are your data from 2008 in the blue column. The light blue is 2013, and then that dark blue is 2018. Along your bottom axis, you're looking at autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, intellectual disability, and other diagnoses. Yeah, guys, you looking at it? Okay. What's interesting here, guys, is if you look, obviously, I don't think CP is going down. I'm not with NIH, okay, but it's a 5% difference there versus what you're looking at as a doubling there, obviously, with autism in the state of California. By no means am I up here saying that the diagnosis of autism has increased in the state of California, all right? We know people move there for supports, but I just want to acknowledge what that state is facing in terms of how many people are there. Here's your trends over the 10 years. So 3 to 5-year-olds are on your left. That goes all the way up to 25,000 people up there. And in the blue, dark blue is what we were looking at 2008, and the light blue is what we're looking at in 2018. So those are the last 10 years across all of those age ranges. So in other words, here we are, guys. There's a 6-year-old somewhere in California. Actually, there are nearly 23,000 6-year-olds somewhere in California. So 10 years from now, that could be what we're facing. 12 years from now, hopefully not. Thank you to all of the wonderful early intervention ABA people out there, right? But these are the numbers of that range of 6 to 9-year-olds and 10 to 13-year-olds that'll be coming up in the next 5 to 10 years in California. All right, guys, what makes EBSH different? So in California, we have homes that are categorized according to level 1 through 4. And then there's some 4+ ones that just get into more intensity, typically around medical issues. EBSH is above all of that, so they consider a next higher level of what it is. And the biggest differentiating feature is the entrance criteria. So the idea is supposed to be that someone's at risk for an inpatient hospital admission, that's the severity of their problem behavior. The reason why I mentioned the idea and why I was so blunt about the experience with Leanne was that the developmental centers are closing in the state of California. This is supposed to be a need that is there because there are families that need their child to live in a home-like setting and get the appropriate supports that they need. What is happening is that the individuals in the developmental centers need to be replaced as they are moving out. So there's definitely been some drama when I get a call from a family that their 19-year-old has destroyed their home, their siblings are now having to live someplace else, the parents are getting divorced. I'm one of those myself, right? We all know not easy to raise a kid with autism, right? I did it twice. Anyway, that it's really hard for me to have to say to that person, number one, I'm not the one who can handle your referral. You got to go to regional center. I can't even talk to them, okay, which is fine. But number two, there's a good chance that there's a 55-year-old person who I know deserves just as much care and support, but they have been sitting in a developmental center for 20 years, not necessarily meeting the criteria, but they don't know where to place them. So this is a challenge right now that we're facing. The staff requirements, hopefully everyone's familiar with the DSP. That's pretty widely known. So again, the difference is that our staff have to go through the typical direct staff personnel training, which involves, medication administration, all of that kind of stuff. But in addition, they have to become registered behavior technicians as well. California requires us to follow crisis prevention intervention, CBI. There's a bunch of other crisis management programs, some that I prefer more, but we follow what the state tells us to follow. We're not required to have CPI instructors, certified instructors, but it was recommended, so we at CABA do. So not only do we have everyone CPI, but we have someone in the home that's an actual certified trainer as well. A brief clinical overview. It's a silly one point to put up there. I'll get back into this in a moment, but we have monthly team meetings. I laugh, especially with this many parents. You're like, yeah, you're an ABA company. You better have monthly team meetings. Those of you that are parents of adults and young adults, you know that you meet once a year, right? So this was actually a big shift for the state of California. So when I'm with my ABA colleagues, they're like, what do you mean that's a lot? I'm like, no, that's a lot. So the state actually supports for the home to be there, the BCBA, the direct staff, the caregivers every month come together and do it more like what I'm assuming some of you went through in a traditional early intervention program. So we do that in our homes every month with each individual. General operations, we're not required to have a residential manager that has an MBA. Ours just happens to, so I wanted to acknowledge that because I think that's helpful. And she also is an RBT, so we had to do those certifications all the way up the line. So that's what you're looking at there. If you go all the way down to the bottom line, the DSP is the RBT plus all of the requirements from DDS and then all of the licensing requirements as well. And then any position above that is the same. The big difference is that we have a lead DSP on staff at all times. So if individuals are staffed one-to-one and we have 3 people in the home, that means at a minimum we have 4 people there plus a house administrator typically. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Helpful stuff, guys? I know, it's kind of like, no, here we go, keep going. What defines a CABA EBSH? I always like to show pictures. This is what it starts like. I have to ask somebody the history here. I always tell the story that I'm assuming that what happened at one point in the state is that they built out all of these homes and they did not call the clinician in until the end. And so what they must have done is just made a blanket rule that because of the problems that emerged when they did that, that instead I even get to pick out paint colors. Yeah, totally why I got a PhD in behavior analysis, by the way, guys, yeah. But no, so they made the rule that I have to be there for every step along the way. So it is another organization that goes through the RFP process with the state to get the home, and they are in charge of the construction and development. Us as the provider are there from day one with them as well, and we are responsible for everything that goes inside the house. But I also need to come in and say, hey, that corner's too sharp. First day I walked in and I dropped to the ground in one of the homes and I started knocking on the marble floors because they looked marble. And this contractor and all these state people are like, who is the weird doctor lady on the ground? And I was like, yeah, you're gonna have to rip these up. So I realized quickly that, okay, it makes sense to have the clinician there. So that's what they look like. I wish I had someone take a picture of me because it was raining that day, so I was walking with an umbrella in a house being like, what am I doing right now, right? What happened to my cute little kids with autism? But it turns out cute, all right? Those are our living rooms. There's the kitchen. I'm very grateful to the state of California for recognizing how challenging this is for a family to have to walk into somebody's home, my home, and say, hey, I need my child to live with you. So for them to be able to walk in and see something like this is quite phenomenal. And our team has done a great job. I know finance over here is not a fan of, what is it, IKEA now? I don't even know what, yeah, it's driving me crazy, I know. CABA Blue, there's our beds. So guys, the individuals, these are great homes in the middle of a wonderful community. We introduce ourselves to the neighbors. We have an open house. The last open house, some neighbor came in with a Tupperware, walked right up, took a big hunk of our cake, put it in her Tupperware, left. We were like, all right, welcome. Yeah, okay. Like, get to know people. And it is a weekly life. Most of them are in a day program right now. We go out to the movies on the weekends. We work with, if they have, some people are in, I can never say it, equine horse, sorry, horse, how do I say the term, right, thank you, sorry. And our team works to be with them throughout every day and live their lives. So I'm going to take a little bit of a turn here. I think I'm still good on time. I'm going to stare at that quote for a second. So switching gears a bit, this is a real quote. So when CABA first started, we've actually only been around 5 years, which I know is odd. I had been a practitioner in that area for a long time. So when I started my company, most of the local regional center leaders knew who I was. So we were very quick to be able to start services. And I just started with traditional ABA. I never thought I would have 6 service lines in the next 4 years and a couple hundred employees. But we became quickly the go-to ABA company to go in and help other residential programs if an individual was struggling. This is pre-EBSH. And so I went back in the field when we started CABA, which was great. And I was at a residential home. And I was working with the staff, and we'd been called in. I think the woman was 23 years old. And I had all the direct staff in the backyard and the house administrator. And I was just kind of taking them through some basics, and they had been working there for years. And the fact that I was there meant that she was struggling, but I was trying to explain to them, I think we were working on putting away laundry or doing the dishes, and I was explaining a task analysis, and I was saying, look guys, I know this is different for you, that we're really insisting that you are looking at each one of these teaching steps and that you need to collect data, and let me explain why, because I know you guys are used to just entering data at the end of your shift on what you remember, and this is a different model. We're really trying to figure out if the teaching steps that we're putting in place are effective and if this individual is learning to, independently do her meal at night. And so I was walking them through. I referenced the Lovaas study, which I don't do too often, but I realized they didn't know the background. And I said, look, there was this study in 1987, and individuals no longer met the criteria for the diagnosis, and they were like, whoa. And so I said, so anyway, this is why we do this repeated. And so you'll see a lot of teaching programs when the CABA team's in here, and we're here to support you. And the house administrator raised her hand. And she said, excuse me, doctor, I have a question. Are you saying that if we keep doing this with her, that it'll become like habitual or something? And it took me a few seconds. I was like, what does she mean? Are you asking me if she can still learn? At which point the house administrator and every direct staff person started nodding. And these were wonderful, well-intentioned people that had really loved her and worked with her for years. And I was like, uh-oh, we have a problem here, guys, right? I'm coming in as an ABA provider who has an ethical obligation to ensure that I'm improving socially meaningful behavior, and I'm working with people who had no idea that the individual could still learn new things. So we got a problem, right? Because what were they trained to do? They were trained that our focus needs to be safe and happy. I agree, and I say that when anyone asks me, what's it like to be an ABA company owner who now runs residential? I say, look, guys, safe and happy, baseline, of course. However, the power of our science, we know that we can actually improve human behavior, right? So I start talking to people about that kind of notion from an ABA perspective. Look, you're chronologically 23. We do an assessment. We say you're functionally 10. That's the programming that your supervisors for the parents in the room should have been doing when your kids were little, right? They're bridging that gap. They're supposed to come in then and say, okay, what teaching do we do to have the 23-year-old not be 12, right? We're going to social skills and language and break those things down. But if we don't know learning is possible, how can we do that, right? So we got to pause here and say, how can we even think about if something is socially meaningful or valid or significant if that's our baseline and we're just focusing on safe and happy? So I had a mind-blowing few months. It started with a guy named Peter Gerhardt. I hear his name's coming up a lot, huh? Right? Dr. Gerhardt is a dear friend of mine. He was kind enough. I called him many months ago when I realized I was getting these invitations, and I said, look, Peter, you know me. I'm lucky. I'm at a point in my career where I'm not interested in branding my company. We're not looking for contracts. I genuinely, if I'm getting, and that's not a bad thing. You should go do good work, but I'm just in a different phase right now. And I said, I want to make sure if I'm going to get out and give these talks that I'm doing something useful. Will you meet with me on a monthly basis so we can kind of just talk about what's going on right now with adolescents and young adults and adults? And I could spend hours telling you guys about my conversations with Peter over the last few months. They've been a ton of fun. But wait, let me give him prompts. That's his current Facebook profile page. Let's make sure we give Peter that. But we were talking one day. I'll make this story quick. I can't even remember what the topic was. I think it was about staff training. And he said, Rachel, have you been to, and he mentioned a very, very famous early intervention center-based program. And I said, I haven't been there, but I trained originally in that model. I'm very familiar with it. And he's like, it was Peter Way. He's like, oh, Rachel, it's amazing. And you walk in there and it's like they're like an orchestra. They all turn left at the same time. They turn right at the same time. Their timers are all going off perfectly. Everyone's saying their instructions perfectly. He's like, I don't know. And he went on to something else. And something about it stuck with me. And then the next day, we call this the Joanne Giggle story. That is her finger from that first photo that I showed of that silly trivia game. But I was in my Northern California office, and I heard some supervisors talking, and they were talking about training a supported living provider that we were helping with an individual that we were supporting. And I heard them say, it's really important to make sure he knows that the individual really likes it when on a kind of a variable time schedule, we say, hey, buddy, what's going on? This is what we're doing right now. This is what we're doing later. So a lot of talking. And to do that about every 15 to 20 minutes, that the individual really liked that. And I chimed in and I said, guys, I'm so happy that you guys are digging down into that. So make sure you write that out and make sure you practice it with them so they really are familiar. And Joanne, sitting on her laptop, started giggling. And I turned, I was like, what's funny? And she's like, I was just reflecting, back in the day when I was a ABA therapist, and the only feedback I got from my supervisor once was that I talked too much. And she started giggling, and she's like, never mind, off topic. And I was like, actually, that's kind of an important point. That's interesting. I have a publication that specifically says, pick up red crayon. Do not say, hey, buddy, go pick up the red crayon over there, right? I can tell you from a behavior analytic account of development why it is important to use less words with a little kid, okay? I can also tell you from a behavior analytic account of development why you should probably do exactly the opposite if you're working with an adolescent or a young adult. So it really started making me think for a second. That's really interesting. And at the same time, I was fortunate a couple months earlier to have done a podcast with this girl you guys might know. She's around sometimes. And I was speaking with Dr. Kelly on this podcast, and I actually referenced a podcast that she had done with Lori. And I said, Amanda, I was really fascinated. Lori mentioned in your podcast that, she thought it was great that you knew that you would never go and do a sorting colors program for a teenager because you're a BCBAD level person. You would never do that. And I told Amanda, I said, you know what, I was super excited Lori said it, and at the same time I was simultaneously bummed because I've seen a lot of BCBA supervisors put in a sorting colors program for a teenager. And so I was like, this is just an interesting time of what we're looking at now in terms of, is it valuable for us to have to say, okay, what is ABA and what's early intervention? Because those aren't necessarily the same thing. And I'm starting to get worried that some of these rules people now think are ABA. So this kind of became our new tagline, that ABA is not defined by mechanical sounding instructions, clipboards, timers, and tokens. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. So this was the beginning of and this is, I've been doing this 20 years, and I think this is obvious, we all know this, but I think this notion of stopping and saying, hang on, what is different with kids and what is different with adults, and what are we still talking about when it comes to ABA? Specifically, we need to reconsider a bunch of stuff. Number one, that many rules are less about ABA and they're more about early intervention. And when you are a traditional ABA provider and you now want to start supporting adolescents and young adults and adults, it's not just about making sure that the supervisor understands an age-appropriate goal. Absolutely every aspect of your organization needs to change. Even down to your billing and payroll department, everything changes. Your intake procedures. When I'm talking to families now, 20 years ago, we had two kinds of moms. Anti-ABA, we knew exactly what to say to them, and had no idea what it was. We knew exactly what to say to them, right? I'm now on the phone with parents that are confused as to why the service coordinator told them to call me at CABA because they told their service coordinator that they don't want ABA. Not because they're anti, they had a decent experience. If they're on the phone with me, by definition, they have an adolescent or a young adult, typically with some severe problem behavior. We support everybody, but that's usually who I end up talking to. But now what I'm getting is parents who say, oh no, we did ABA, we had a good experience, but we still need the support, so we don't need that. And when I probe a little bit more, I figure out what's going on. They think we're gonna be sitting at the kitchen table with their 22-year-old. And that is a little concerning to me. So everything needs to change. Our measurement strategies, the difference with an IEP versus an IPP, everything. So, token systems, PECs versus sign, number of trials per hour. Oh, number of goals per auth period. Okay, I love this one. I just looked at an insurance person in the face a month ago and I said, you want to know what the problem is? I understand you're going to say, what, if I do 20 hours, I need to have like 15 goals. I know you won't admit that, but that's what you're telling your reviewers, right? He's like, I know, Rachel, I know. I said, all right, you're going to call me. I'm going to need 100 hours. And he was all like, oh, I know. I said, yeah, I'm going to give you one goal. And I was like, what? I need 100 hours, and the one goal is that no one dies. Is that okay? Like, so here we are, guys, all right? So this is not ABA, all right? We use a behavior analytic framework to evaluate these things. So I'm not saying that there's no data to support PECS or SIGN or number of trials and learning opportunities, but even when the data support those things, those rules don't become ABA. We're using ABA to evaluate those rules, all right? So again, I think we're getting the idea of what I'm trying to take home. I hope it's helpful for you guys. Bottom line number 2, yes, I am known for having several bottom lines. All right, I'll try and go fast. This notion of bridging the chronological and functional age gap. Another moment when I was talking to Dr. Kelly in that podcast, and we had that moment about Lori. Amanda said, Rachel, you're so right. You know, it's interesting because in Hawaii, I'm going to prioritize using chopsticks over tying shoes because that's more socially significant. That's more socially valid, right? And I was like, yeah, she's right. And we're talking about quality of life. She's right. And then on reflection, after that Peter Gerhardt moment and the giggling moment in the office, a couple months later, I thought, well, but we have a problem. As a society, we have decided how to define quality of life for a child. We all agree that we can make that decision for children. As a society, we've decided what it means for a kid to be independent. We all agree we can do that. Uh-oh. Who am I to tell a 30-year-old that their current situation represents a quality of life? Who am I to tell a 25-year-old that this is what it means to be independent? So even though I agreed with what Amanda said, at the same time, I was like, yeah, but this is a little different. You can say we're going to use chopsticks over shoes because that kid better use chopsticks, right? But I can't say that to an adult. So now we're facing a whole other problem, which is mind-blowing experience, all right, guys, which it shouldn't be, but it really was for me when I thought, hold up, we're going to not only need to redefine how people are considering these arbitrary rules and somehow think these are ABA, but also how we're defining quality of life. So, what do we need to do? Again, all our intervention rules, guys, do not equal ABA at all, and I think it's incredibly important for people that are moving into adolescence and young adults and adult work that they remember that. Number 2, we need to move beyond just age-appropriate goal setting. If you asked me a year ago to do a talk like this, that's what I focused on, and that's incredibly important, and I hope people that are starting to educate, especially traditional ABA providers that want to start supporting older people, that they're focusing on this. But to me, this is just step 1, and I'm worried that a lot of people think that's it. More importantly, we clearly need to revisit how we are defining quality of life. And kind of gotta get some outcome measures around that, guys, right? So not only do we need to redefine it, but then we need to make sure that we're actually measuring that we are achieving an improved quality of life. I always joke, as I said, what do we need to do? As my mother says, the royal we. So I meant that for all you guys, so everyone go work on that, all right? Briefly, no, what we're doing at CABA, just briefly, we don't want to grow anymore. I've turned down 15 homes in the state of California, guys. So they call me all the time. We wanted to make sure we were doing it right. So we have kept it at 4, and I've made it clear that we are not opening any other homes through the regional center system, I should clarify. But in the meantime, we are getting so many calls from 2 different groups, really. One is traditional ABA providers. I was a professor for a long time and have a lot of amazing former students that run great early intervention companies. And they're saying, look, Rachel, we need help now expanding to adolescents, young adults. So I said, all right, let's go help them. We can do that. And then similarly, behavioral health people that have never offered a service that required a BCBA or an RBT that want to now. So we said, okay, we can come and help them. So we have launched CABA Consulting, and this is kind of how we talk about it, exactly what I just said. Do you focus on ABA for kids and you want to expand to ages we can help? Do you do other behavioral support work and need to now rely more on an evidence-based foundation and deal with this whole BCBA RBT thing that you think is just another set of letters that you need to put on your requirement? And I don't mean to sound mean about that. I mean that as a point of fact, in the state of California, most residential providers, when EBSH came out, they were annoyed. They thought RBT was some other certification. No concept that the notion was that we're doing this because we're genuinely improving human behavior and not just keeping everyone safe and happy, and that having that credential means that they have increased skills to teach things. All right, guys. So our biggest challenge so far, I was a direct staff person. I'm not trying to be mean, all right? I am also an idealist, and I thought, okay, we're just gonna hire a bunch of people that have experience in residential, and we're gonna show them the power of ABA, and it's gonna be awesome. It's really, really hard. It's really, really hard, especially if people have been in certain practices for years upon years upon years. So I'm really focused now on, and I was naive because I trained on the East Coast, and New England Center has, that people come because they're going to graduate school in ABA or becoming special ed teachers, so they're working in the residential homes. I thought, oh, we have relationships with Cal State LA and Pepperdine, and I know all of those guys, and everyone's working with little kids with autism. And now we're facing with taking an entire workforce of individuals that have never been told that they are, and as the story I just said, didn't know a 23-year-old could still learn something, and having to start to make that shift now. So it has been a challenge, and I just wanted to make sure I was honest about that. We're learning a lot, but it's not easy. All right, guys, the tides need to be changing, and again, we gotta love us some Gearhart. So one other conversation when Peter and I were talking about all this, because I said, what, do you think this is good? Should I kind of focus on this notion of people really stepping back and realizing that perhaps what they think is ABA is early intervention, and kind of resetting how we need to refocus on ABA and what that means? And he said, yeah, and we got back to that staff training issue, and he sent me this grid. He's actually presenting at ABA this year, and he said, Rachel, can you give me some feedback on this? This is what I want to do. I'm giving you guys a preview. If anyone's going to DC, you're welcome. He said, I want to put this up, and he said, I would like to talk about what I think are the current contingencies maintaining staff's behavior. And then I want to talk about the shift that I think is going to need to happen as we're seeing this push for people to move more into adolescents, young adults, and adults. And what you're seeing is me being such a dork. The blue is me adding in. I'm like, yeah, you send me stuff for feedback, I'm giving you feedback, all right? But so the blue is me, but what did Peter say? Peter said a current contingency right now is that ABA staff members, and as a reminder, Peter's in a school based with teenagers, all right? But he said those staff members are being reinforced for technical precision, and where we need to shift that entire contingency. You guys remember contingency, right? The parents, right? The ABCs, they go on for us all the time, okay, guys, all the time, right? Reinforce for socially important behavior change outside of the classroom. Yes, that is a shift that needs to happen. Secondly, that right now there's a focus on being reinforced for avoiding risk. That's incredibly important, but Peter's making the argument, and I added on the continuously assessing, reinforced for continuously assessing and managing risk. That's a shift if you really stop and think about the difference there. Reinforced for keeping safe. Incredibly important. We're not saying you don't do that. Now we're saying we got to experience a shift here as a group of people entering this world together. And how are we going to make it so that all of the staff are being reinforced for teaching, and I threw in, and ensuring ongoing maintenance of safety skills. So it's not just an issue of making sure we're avoiding risk, that we are improving human behavior. We have decades of research to show that we know how to do that. And for the record, the decades of research demonstrating the value of ABA was done with adults long before this little 1987 study. So we know that. Reinforced for competence in one small area of ABA. The woman's in the house. She's going to give me a hard time later. I said, and he said that needs to be shifted to reinforce for competence across the entirety of ABA. And my note to Peter Gerhardt was yes. And I said, no, we need to talk about this whole issue around specializations. I'm not going to jump into it today. I have not decided what I think on this topic. If anyone has heard, there's definitely people starting to talk about whether or not we need to have people at the BCBA level have specializations in different ages, severity of problem behavior. And I'm not sold on that yet. I haven't thought through it enough yet. I will tell you, though, my most recent shift, now what I've gone through with training DSPs to become RBTs, is there might be something to be said at the direct staff level around those specializations in addition to that RBT level. So this is like the last few weeks for me, so I'm fresh off the presses in terms of my thought process here. But I did want to show this grid and give a shout out to Peter for really looking at things this way, because he says it to me all the time. He's like, I got my one little classroom, so I'm happy to be talking to you to try and get this stuff out there. So, all right, guys, so what now? Let's pause to take a step back. Again, we are talking about increased independence and improved quality of life. What I wanted to say to you guys today when it comes to moving into residential supports and an ABA foundation is we have to be thinking about this both for the individuals and for the staff members, all right? There's a lot of focus right now on making sure that staff are feeling fulfilled, and there's some interesting data coming out. I saw some data from the Midwest on DSPs. It was fascinating. It was a stats study, actually. I do stats, see, even though I'm a behavior analyst. It was a stats study, and they actually measured if the DSPs were more frustrated by aggression or swearing and inappropriate language aimed at them. Which one do you think upset them more? Swear. Right? It's fascinating. fascinating. So there's a movement happening right now. We got to make sure that staff are feeling valued, that they're happy, that they're doing well. So we're trying to focus on that as well. Again, social significance, same thing. What does this mean for the individuals, and what does this mean for the people supporting them? So recognizing that I was training staff that had no idea that people could still learn new skills, right there, that's where the idealist in me comes out, right? If I can show them that, then is that going to make their job more fulfilling? Just like it was for all the great little therapists that worked with our kids when they were little, right? That's why they were excited, was seeing that first moment of eye contact, that first word. That's still there. It just looks different. And now we need to make sure that the staff are oriented to that as well. And then again, those outcome measures, guys. So you can't determine if something's meaningful if you don't have related outcome measures. And you can't even determine improvement if you don't have related outcome measures. And here's the problem. I'm not going to go get the VB map to show me that the 30-year-old that was destroying their home is doing any better right now, right? The Vineland is not going to give me a sensitive measure for that, okay? Essentials for functional living, these are good tools, these are helpful resources, but these are not going to be what drives our outcome measures. So this is a whole huge talk, obviously, but just to give you guys an idea, we don't really need to overcomplicate it. I'm amazed when I have insurance companies coming to me and asking me to help them with this. I'm like, wow, okay, I will. Let's look at how many hospitalizations there were. There's really good measures for body checks. Let's make sure we're measuring level of injury and we're documenting those decreases. Protective procedures. We are in the midst right now of making sure that we're decreasing the frequency and the duration of that, right? Obviously, coming back to social validity, the decrease in staffing ratios as well, it's a big one. A lot of people think that I'm so excited when I get a contract where I need to have a 2-to-1. I'm not excited because that means there's somebody who needs a 2-to-1 out there in the world, and that makes me sad every single day, all right? B, for the record, I actually don't make any money off the second staff. I don't make any money anyway, okay? But I definitely don't make any money off the second staff member. That's not beneficial. There is no margin there at all, getting that person to another client. So, but honestly, even from a business perspective, I would never do it that way. But I think people don't really realize that. So we should be decreasing those ratios for all the obvious reasons. There's no value in doing that. And that is a measure of doing good work if that person is staying safe, contributing to society, and leading a meaningful life. All right, guys, so in conclusion, I know that was a lot. I hope it was helpful. I'm going to go back to my email. Is that okay? I just want to make sure I did a good job. So did I give the narrative on how I did this 20 years ago and how I ended up here today? Maybe just a little bit. I hope so. All right. Talked a little bit about data in terms of how the EBSH model came to be in California through DDS. Showed you guys those data. Gave you some important considerations about when you want to launch it, the staff requirements, the clinical overview. I think the most important part is what I said to Judith and Mike and Lori, which is if I didn't do any of the above, if I did all of the above, please be honest. I can take it. I do value the feedback, guys. So if you have any, please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to address any of your questions. So thank you, guys.